In this video, we're going to go through the 16 personality types vices, things they specifically struggle with and why. So let's get into it. The 16 personality types all have different vices that they use, that they abuse, different things that they struggle with. Some of these things can be more difficult for one personality type than another, and some can be kind of similar. These things are often overcome with some level of maturity and humility as these types get older and realize these different flaws. So let's kind of take a look at these for each personality type. For INFJs, they can often struggle with things like lust, boundless desire. They have introverted intuition hero, which means they're very focused, they're very strategic, they know what they want, but this also means they really do know what they want. And that can be a problem for them if they're too focused on something. They ignore the consequences, they ignore the emotional effects, and they just go after that thing, especially if it's something that has to do with desire and lust. They may kind of just do things to see what they can get away with. See, can I do this? Can I do that? Because introverted intuition is all about what I can do. I could, I can, what can I? And questioning those what ifs. It's very abstract and it's kind of finding different paths, but this can be a viceful thing as well. They can be corrupted by bad values or habits of others. So this is kind of slightly different, but INFJs do have extroverted feeling pattern, extroverted sensing, aspirational. They really want to connect with other people. They want to be social. That's why they're often known as social chameleons. This can mean that they get corrupted by bad values of other people as well. They might adopt other people's bad values just to be friends with them, just to make them feel better. They may see someone doing some bad habit and they kind of want to enable it because they don't want to necessarily cause conflict or upset other people. So they might go along with it, they might adopt it, and then they might kind of develop that addiction within themselves. And this desire for connection, this desire to not be lonely, which INFJs can often feel, can cause a sacrifice of that integrity and authenticity that they want to have. So this can be one thing that INFJs struggle with. ENFJs, on the other hand, slightly different. They struggle more with people pleasing, with going after people, trying to make them happy, getting validation, and, feeling guilty if they ever set up boundaries, feeling bad about themselves if they ever try to stand up for themselves. This is something ENFJs can struggle with. They may lack those boundaries as they don't want to establish, guardrails around other people that causes them not to like them as much, not love them as much. They want to be needed, they want to be loved, and they don't want to do anything to step on anyone's toes, and this can cause problems. Another thing ENFJs may struggle with is they can be cruel if they feel like people are not listening to them. If people are, talking over them, saying what they think and not letting the ENFJ say what they think, they can be really cruel and cutting, and they may not mean the things they say, but they're just trying to say something mean. They're trying to think what's something that would hurt this person's feelings the most, because it kind of flips on its head when they go to their superego. And this can come from a lack of expressing thoughts, a holding back of what they truly think. They may try and make people feel good and be nice and not say what's really under the surface, and then it can all come out at once. So that's something that ENFJs can struggle with. INFPs is a little bit different. INFPs can struggle with self-importance. They have introverted feeling hero. They have a lot of positive emotion, a lot of positive self-esteem, and they can feel very self-important, like they're better than other people, that they're really, really good at everything, and that other people are bad at everything. And that lack of humility may result in a very high self-worth, where they believe they're God, where they believe they're a cult leader or something, and INFPs can struggle with that if they're not humble. Another thing is they can be disrespectful if they feel that they're not thought highly of. So this is something that INFPs can be viceful with, is being kind of disrespectful, being a little rude, saying something they think poorly about someone else, kind of having that devil's advocate. Think of that kind of other side of them, that kind of like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, that ability to have that other voice in the back of your head. You're not necessarily going to say it, but INFPs can struggle sometimes with that coming out and having those really negative thoughts about other people come to the surface. They may be mean, they may be demeaning. It's all that, gain of respect and control that INFPs want back when they feel like they've lost it, and this can be something they might struggle with. And ENFPs can struggle with hedonism often as a vice. They really have that SI aspirational, that desire to have a good, safe experience. And while they often can feel, not accepted, not understood by the world, they may not feel close connections with people, they may not be having a good experience, and they often want to overdo that with pleasure-seeking activity, and they can struggle with that if it goes too far. It may lack self-control or limitations to be able to constrain those, and they can really overdo it and just keep going on and on with that, and not necessarily have those boundaries of where to stop. So that's something ENFPs can struggle with. They can also be very destructive if they're having a bad experience. So it kind of goes one or two ways. ENFPs may go into the direction of pleasure, trying to really enjoy the moment, have a good time, and overcome any negative experience. Or they may become very destructive outward if they're not getting a good experience, and they can sometimes be very destructive physically. And that kind of has to do with that extroverted sensing demon coming out and exploding outwards if that introverted sensing aspirational is not taken care of. It's like the little baby inside of the introverted sensing as that fourth function. It kind of goes in descending order. That's kind of a different topic, but if that baby is harmed, if that insecurity, that mushy core is attacked, it really explodes outwards. And that's something ENFPs may struggle with if not developed. And for INTJs, I did write ENFPs, but it is for INTJs. They can struggle with a lack of empathy. INTJs are kind of known for this, with extroverted feeling trickster, very low down on their function stack, and they can have a difficult time empathizing with other people's emotions. If they have their plan, it makes sense, they feel good about it. Trying to understand why people don't feel good about it can be kind of a frustrating experience for them, and they can sometimes disregard other people's feelings entirely. They may not even care about what is ethical or kind. They might see what they can get away with, push boundaries, try and see what they can do, kind of like INFJs, but they don't even have that extroverted feeling to mediate that, and that can be a problem. INTJs can also be very destructive if they feel betrayed, if they feel like people have gone against them or conspired against them. They can be very tyrannical and destructive in response. This can lead to vengefulness, bitterness, resentment, all of these negative emotions, and if INTJs don't process this correctly, they can go after other people and try and get revenge on them. So this can be a problem internally. They might have a difficult time letting it go as well, which can lead to a bad mental state. We have ENTJs. ENTJs, they can struggle with controlling other people. They may feel, worried that they're not going to have, a positive emotion. They have introverted feeling aspirational. And so they can definitely worry about not having, feeling good about themselves, being heartbroken, being, betrayed as well. And so they might want to control other people. They don't necessarily care about other people's freedom because they might worry that other people are going to misuse their freedom and conspire against them. So they can definitely go into that zone. They can also be destructive if they want more than they have. So this is another vice that ENTJs may have. They're very productive. They're very good at succeeding and accomplishing things. But if they, get to a point where they have a lot of things and they keep going, they can be greedy in an unethical way if they don't have those boundaries within themselves. So they can be so good at winning that they keep going and going, and it can end up becoming more greedy. We have INTPs. INTPs, they can struggle with not caring about anything. So it's almost a slightly kind of different perspective to be very apathetic, not necessarily caring about what's going on, that introverted feeling demon, not necessarily having a priority system, knowing what it values, knowing what's important to it. And so they might go through life not necessarily caring or having any attachment emotionally to things around them. They may not feel like doing anything important for others, necessarily having those social bonds if they don't develop this function. They can also kind of be destructive if they feel underappreciated. So it kind of goes hand in hand. They can often be very apathetic and not care. And this gets even worse if people around them don't care. So if they already have a difficult time having emotion, if other people don't have emotions for them, that can make them very upset. And it can cause them to be even more immoral and have less moderation because they don't want to necessarily live by emotional guidelines if other people aren't living by them as well. So that can lead to a problem. Then we have ENTPs. ENTPs, they can struggle with, taking more than they need at certain times. They can worry about their own future. They can worry that they don't have enough. Introverted sensing, aspirational, that anxious inferior function can worry that's not going to get a good experience, and they can end up taking more than they need to guarantee a good experience for themselves. And they may not feel like they can do anything without it being easy as well. It goes into that worry about their future, that I can't do this, I can't do that. And being very worried, they try to take more than they necessarily need potentially, and then they also worry that they can't do it. So they might sabotage themselves with a lack of motivation. They can also be closed-minded to new information, cut off other sources with that TE critic. That's kind of where they get one of their reputations for being a debater, but it also can lead to closed-mindedness, and that can lead them to move away from the truth if they don't already know it, because they aren't learning new information. So they're not unable to process things, they're just ignorant of new information. And then we have ISFJs. ISFJs can struggle with fearing the unknown, being very afraid that things are going to get worse, that things are going to change. And that fear of change, the fear of new, can lead to a lot of attitudes that are very fearful about new things and wanting to preserve the past. They may hate what is unfamiliar if it scares them. They may feel very tribal, very closed in if things are, unfamiliar. They're not necessarily going to be accepting and excited about new things, new change. And they can lack a little bit of definition about who they want to be as well. So this is kind of an unrelated note, but they have introverted intuition demon, which means that they can sometimes have a difficult time defining what they want and who they want to be in the abstract realm. They know what they should do, who they are, but being able to define future scenarios can be a bit more difficult. And this may lead to selfish intentions. If they don't plan ahead what they want, it might just come out in a selfish way. ESFJs are a little different. They have, a more of a social struggle, a struggle with being too interdependent, too connected to other people. They may be giving, trying to be nice, trying to make everyone like them and very connected, but then they might expect things in return. They may give to get, a bit of a covert contract, and they can struggle with being so interconnected with other people that they don't have their own life, their own plans, their own goals, and they can become very interdependent where they expect people to give back everything they've given and potentially more. Another thing ESFJs can do is kind of lack a filter. If they're upset while they're normally trying to be very nice, they can sometimes say things unfiltered, and they may say even intentionally hurtful things if they feel like they've been hurt or criticized too much. So they definitely can have a wicked tongue if they want to. ISTJs can struggle with being a little bit too rule following the rules, following the dotted line. They may be corrupt or enforce bad rules. They're not necessarily going to have those emotional boundaries around the rules, around what they're supposed to do, and they may just follow the letter of the law without necessarily thinking about it, and that could be a problem. They can also struggle with doing things for other people. They may not necessarily care about others. They may not care about their ethical duty, and they can sometimes just be focused on themselves. And if they don't have that developed emotional values for what they spend time on, who they help, who they love, it can be a problem for ISTJs where they may just kind of live, a normal life without necessarily understanding what's important to them. ESTJs can struggle sometimes with being too ruthless. They have extroverted feeling demon. They can sometimes be very hard on other people. They can be very ruthless if they feel like other people aren't catering towards their feelings or understanding them, and they can be quite, cutting with their words. Sometimes they can prioritize efficiency over people if they're a managerial role, or if they're focused on, running something. They can focus on those cutthroat initiatives as opposed to focusing on what makes people happy. They can also have a difficult time taking blame for things. They're very insecure with their introverted feeling aspirational about being a good person, and when it comes to taking blame and admitting that they did something wrong, they can have a difficult time if it makes them feel bad about themselves. They may assume everyone else is at fault for mistakes and try and blame outwards to avoid having to look too much inwards, but like I said before, this can be taken care of with some development. ISFPs can struggle with sometimes being too independent. They know what they want. They know what makes them happy, what makes them feel good, what things make them, they enjoy more than others, and they won't necessarily want to, connect with other people, work with a group, work for a boss. They can have a difficult time doing that. And if they lack kind of a social responsibility, if immature of understanding how their actions affect other people and how their decisions have consequences, they can sometimes just kind of stay in that loop of doing what they want, doing what feels good. A lot of ISFPs can struggle with things like gambling, addiction. Obviously all the types can, but for ISFPs it can sometimes come from this source, and they may struggle with avoiding criticism as well and prioritizing this kind of feel good attitude, feeling good about their emotions, feeling good about themselves, and what they want, and just do kind of what feels good and stay in that zone. ESFPs, they can struggle with being too moment focused. They're focused on the present, having a good time, making everyone, have a good time, but they might have a difficult time when it comes to looking towards the future, when it comes to having responsible plans. They can enjoy their life and make other people enjoy life, but they're not always going to look down the long road. Another thing that ESFPs can struggle with is pride, sometimes feeling really good about themselves, puffing themselves up, talking themselves up, maybe avoiding blame, maybe making up things to try and sound better, bragging. And ESFPs can struggle with that when underdeveloped as well. And we have ISTPs can sometimes be too risk-taking. They're very adventurous. They're very determined. That they can definitely have a lot of skill, but sometimes they may lack a bit of consequential awareness of how things may go, and they can keep taking risks, trying to kind of get a thrill, and sometimes result in really negative consequences for them or other people if they're not thinking ahead. ISTPs can also struggle with arrogance due to their intelligence. ISTPs have a lot of logical abilities and they're very smart, but they can alienate people with this intelligence, close people's ideas out, not care about other people's different strengths, and they can end up becoming very close-minded and arrogant with this function instead of being accepting and understanding of other people's points of view. Then ESTPs, it says ESFPs, but ESTPs can struggle sometimes with being hypocritical. ESTPs have extroverted sensing hero. They see what everyone is doing. They see what other people are doing. And sometimes they can just do what other people are doing and kind of just go along with the crowd, but they may also judge other people for what they're doing. So this can lead to hypocrisy. ESTPs can also sometimes struggle with a lack of commitment. They can struggle to necessarily choose one thing, choose one person, really choose one path, and not necessarily want to make a long-term plan because they may be worried that it goes awry. So they sometimes just want to live in the moment, have a good time, just like ESFPs, without necessarily committing to one thing and planning long-term for it. So those are some of the things that ESTPs can struggle with, and some of the things all the types can struggle with. If you guys enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments down below. If you want anything else in this vein, let me know, and please subscribe as it helps the channel. And I hope you all have a great day.